Hey guys, and welcome to Scientific Drinking.
Today we're talking about how to get a NASA internship.
Cheers. So I have a Pathways internship, and she's a NIF intern, and that's a, what is it, NASA?
Internships and fellowships.
NASA internships and fellowships. I'm going to talk a little bit about Pathways, and she's going to talk about NIF. And NIF is a little bit more common, isn't it? There's more NIF internships than Pathways.
Yeah, so NIFs are typically offered on a semester basis. Sometimes they go on a 2-semester or 3-semester if it's a particularly long project, but the majority fall into one. And different directorates request an intern for their projects. They source it through the NASA Force website, which is basically a kind of a Google search, but for NASA internships. So when you apply to a project, you can apply to a maximum of 15 per semester. If you're selected, then they give you a nice call back and they say, hey, come on out for a semester and do some good work.
Pretty much similar for Pathways. You apply through the same kind of NASA Pathways internship website, which is the same website she just mentioned. When I applied, actually, they just changed it over from the OSSI, One Stop Student Initiative, to this new platform. But apparently there was some kind of error in the website, and I got a spring internship. So I had to pretty much uproot my life because I had actually literally just moved into a new house. I'd been in there for less than a week. I had started a graduate program. I actually started a business out there, and within 2 weeks of settling in, I got a call from NASA, and you don't say no to NASA. you can't turn that down. So, and you're coming from where?
All the way from New Jersey down to Kennedy Space Center.
You don't get a housing allowance with the Pathways internship. You get a stipend, and it kind of works on a rotation between your school and your position, your work position at NASA, and you go back and forth. NIFs are mostly a one-off, right?
So yeah, you get one lump stipend, and they also intend for that to go towards housing too.
Did you get a choice of where you wanted to go, or?
Not really. Kennedy was my first offer, so I kind of jumped on that right away.
Okay. I had actually selected up at Goddard Space Center for something completely unrelated, a remote occulting project. Never heard back from them, but I got 2 calls from Kennedy. So when you apply for these internships, everyone at NASA can see them, including JPL, and you never know really where you're going to go. I had one other internship that was similar to the NIFs over at JPL about a year ago, and I didn't apply for that one. I applied to something completely different as well. So I don't get what I asked for, but it's still pretty good. All right, so let's talk about what is actually required. Besides the different types of internships, the Pathways and NIFs, what is actually required to get an internship at NASA? Well, NASA doesn't have just engineering positions, it's all over the board. In fact, I think you're not actually, you're an engineer, not in an engineering position, right?
Yeah, so the way that it goes is that NASA, of course, loves its engineers, and they love seeing a lot of people from STEM filling in their positions. So I'm currently working in the integration office, which does a lot of the document controls for NASA, which is surprisingly important. When you have 16 directorates in one center, and then one center operating among a dozen other centers, things can get lost in translation. So having communication between the documents is really important.
And you've been moving around a lot. You've been talking to all kinds. I mean, you talked to me, you shadowed me, intern shadowing another intern, and then you've been talking to a lot of other people from around the center. So
yeah, actually, when my mentor contacted me, he said, I know your physics, but you can do some good work in the business office, and we can just kind of send you around the center to check everybody else out. I've been to the Applied Physics Lab, I've been through SwampWorks, I've been through the Electrostatics Lab, and it's really fun to get that little snapshot of somebody's day when you shadow them, and so I really enjoyed that.
For the record, SwampWorks is Kennedy Space Center's research branch. They do a lot of stuff with lunar regolith, dust mitigation, all kinds of stuff like that. As distinct from the lunar lander, a lot of the lunar lander work is now being issued to Marshall Space Center in Alabama, or Marshall Space Flight Center. So like I said, NASA isn't all about engineering. There's lawyers, there's medical staff, there's logistics personnel, and there's people all over the board. So I actually had someone that stayed with me that was studying law, and she applied for a NASA internship just for the hell of it. She didn't expect to qualify because she thought it was all engineers, but to her surprise, she was brought into the legal counsel office here at the Space Center. So just because you're not an engineer doesn't mean you can't work at NASA. That being said, it is a little bit difficult to get in. One of the requirements for both NIFs and Pathways internships is a grade point average of at least 3.0. Generally, good references matter. You have a lot of good references when you applied?
Yeah, definitely. I had a couple other experiences before NASA where people were able to speak to my qualifications. So I think that definitely played a pivotal role.
And same with me. So I had a couple other internships at JPL. I had one at Lowell Observatory, another one at PM&AM Research, which is a small defense contractor in Southern Arizona. And of course, my mentors at school as well. And that being said, you don't need a stellar GPA. Like I said, that GPA 3.0 is important, but if you meet that minimum qualification, then that box is checked. It's all about the letters of recommendation after that. And granted, that depends on who you talk to and where you go, but generally the sentiment at NASA is letters of recommendation matter more than GPA does.
I think also interestingly, a lot of people ignore the personal essay box. I know a lot of other interns that got the internship, but they kind of didn't give their best selves to writing an essay that really talked to why they wanted a NASA internship. I was actually talking to my mentor, and he said that one of the big reasons that he liked me as a candidate was that he thought my personality was really well captured in my essay, and I really talked about why I wanted NASA above just any old internship.
Extracurricular activities matter when you're looking at someone. Projects, volunteer work, things like that, all of that add a little bit to your application to NASA. That being said, even with all those qualifications, it's still a little bit tough to get in. Out of my Pathways group, there was about 2,000 applicants, and only 33 were selected.
For my particular slot for the fall, there was about 100 applicants, so I was 1 out of 100.
There you go, 1%. So another difference between NIFs and Pathways is that NIFs is a one-shot internship. It just lasts for 1 semester, summer, spring, or fall. The intent of Pathways is to bring you onto a permanent position, assuming everything works out. And in most cases it does, unless you do something catastrophic or you're just not compatible with the culture for whatever reason. And so generally you'll do rotations between work and school, and eventually they'll say, okay, you have graduated, you've met the minimum number of hour requirements, which is generally like 2 semesters worth of work, and they bring you on to full-time. Pretty much the only way to get a job at NASA is through an internship. There are very few exceptions to that. I know probably a few people who've gotten jobs as direct hires, which is via usajobs.com. So if you already have a degree and you're looking to get hired at NASA, USA Jobs is the way to go. All right, so far we've covered 3 points of what it takes to get a NASA internship. One's a minimum of 3.0 GPA. The second one is having good letters of recommendation. And the third one is having a good personal essay. But there is a fourth point that I want to make that's especially valid for Pathways interns, and that is veterans preference. So I mentioned that there was 33 people in my group that got accepted out of 2,000. Of that 33, 7 of us were veterans. So that's a significant chunk. I mean, almost you're talking about 25% there. It's actually a point system. So you get an extra 5 points for being a veteran. If you're a disabled veteran, that's 10 points. And I'm pretty sure, because out of my group, there was 4 people named Matt, that you get an extra 5 points if your name is Matt. Any veterans in your group?
Yes, there's 2 people. So this cycle around, we have about 30 NIFs interns at Kennedy, and I believe 2 of them are previous veterans.
So now we talk about how to get an internship. Let's talk about what things have been like since we got here.
So they give us a lump sum in the beginning, and they're like, okay, we're gonna give you 40% up front, so you can pay for your your housing and not get kicked out. And then 40% halfway through, and then the last 20% at the end. Payday is a big deal for the NIFs interns.
Yeah, definitely. It's similar. I mean, don't expect a lot of money. I mean, NASA, you go to NASA, you work for the government because it's a solid job. I mean, that's the idea. You don't work at NASA if you want to get rich. So it's a similar story with Pathways. If you're coming out here and you're doing a bachelor's program, then it's going to be about GS5 level pay. And you can look up these pay scales online, and it's adjusted based on where you live and what the cost of living is. So if you're living in LA, going to JPL, you're gonna get a little bit more than you would coming out here in Florida. So if you're coming out here as a graduate student doing a master's or PhD program, you're gonna start at a GS7. Halfway through your master's program, you're eligible for promotion to a GS9. What's been the best part of your internship since you come out here?
I mean, I don't want to be cheesy, but I love the people. Everyone at NASA has like this, what I would like to say, like the NASA mentality. So it's very teamwork based, very openness to talking about what you're working on. Everybody's really excited about where they are and what they're doing. So it's not hard to email a bunch of people and be like, hey, can I shadow the work you're doing? And most of the time I've gotten yes. I actually don't think I've gotten a no. I think I've gotten maybe later, maybe 2 times. But yeah, everybody's always excited to share what they're working on and really friendly.
Yeah, I found a similar experience, and it's very much a first name basis around here, even with management. So I can go up to, I mean, the only person I think I wouldn't call on a first name basis is Mr. Cabana. And even though I'm talking about him and not to him, I'm still saying Mr. Cabana.
Yeah.
And for the record, Mr. Cabana is the center director, Bob Cabana, former astronaut. And even though, I mean, the military mentality in me is always saying sir and ma'am, and that generally goes over, but there's a few people say, don't call me sir or ma'am, call me the first name. And so, yeah, I mean, and they're very, very approachable, very open to you wanting to do multiple projects. Ever since I got here, I've had my hands in 2 or 3 different things at a time. And everyone was just like, yeah, hey, you do you. As long as you're doing good work and you're accountable for whatever you do, then it works. I'm telling you, I come back to this. You've been all over the place. I mean, even by my standards, you've talked to pretty much everyone on the center. What do you think you're getting out of the internship? How's this preparing you for future endeavors?
Yeah, I think I definitely have a better idea of what I want to do someday. So I think a good thing about NIFs is you can eliminate, in only being here 16 weeks during the semester, 10 weeks in summer, you can eliminate what you do and don't want to do. So I shadowed a couple guys in the more political side of NASA, and that was kind of a trip. I think I prefer the lab work because it's a lot more straightforward. And that wasn't something I knew before coming out here.
And you met Jim Bridenstine, right?
Yeah, I got to see him when I went to cover the International Astronautical Conference.
Did they send you up there for a project or?
No, actually I applied through NASA Social, which is its own program.
Okay.
And they gave us like a whole behind the scenes package, basically. Anyone can actually apply for NASA Social.
Anyone that works at NASA?
No, anyone.
Anyone.
We got to go to the exhibit hall early, so we got to see what JAXA and ESA and all the other countries' space organizations were doing too, not just NASA. We got front row seats to all the panels. So not only did I get to see Jim front row, but they also had a panel with 6 astronauts from the shuttle days. And we got to hear a lot of their thoughts about stuff, which was great. So that was a really unique opportunity. And obviously NIFs was 100% supportive of that. So I was really glad that I got to take that trip.
Okay. What's the application like for that?
So they go through your social media. You have to submit your name, your social media, and why you think you'd be a particularly good candidate to represent NASA Social.
So the objective for this program is if you have a big social media following, then you can spread the word about NASA. Okay.
And you don't have to be like a NASA blogger or anything like that. So I went as a cosplayer. What I told them, which I believe 100% to be true, is that I have a lot of people that are fans of like the more nerdier aspects of pop culture. So Star Wars, Star Trek. So there are people that probably have a vague idea of what's going on in the space industry, but aren't entirely educated about what we're doing nowadays.
Right. So similarly, I was sent up to Maine, and this wasn't such a NASA Social thing. This was presenting at a conference, and this was sponsored through the Launch Services program at NASA as a result of some of my work. I'm telling you this mainly to emphasize the opportunities that are available as an intern. They don't expect you to get coffee. They don't expect you to run around and do their bidding. You're doing work, and the more you apply yourself, the more work you're given. You get what you put into it, and that's true of a lot of things, but especially true at NASA because there's a lot of opportunities available to grow and get papers published, get your word out there for those of you that are in the science community to grow. And NASA really helps you with that. So the second to last part we're talking about is why NASA. Why did you apply to NASA?
So back in 2011, when they were just wrapping up the space shuttle program. They had like a 6 a.m. launch of one of the last voyages of the space shuttle program. It was actually the last nighttime launch. I remember being woken up like that early, and I was like, there's gotta be nothing that's worth getting up this early. And then I got to watch the shuttle launch, and I just completely blew my mind. And I remember, because I wrote this in my personal essay as well, I was like, I had gone to school and obviously heard about the space program and everything, but it was just something entirely else to see it all come together and really like actually launch us to the moon in space and everything.
Yeah, it's something else. I didn't even see my first launch until I got out here, so I'd never seen a NASA launch, even though I had worked at JPL and done all this stuff. And it's something else. So if you haven't gotten a chance to come out to Kennedy Space Center and see an actual launch, I don't want to completely say it's life-changing, because it's probably not life-changing to everyone, but it was at least to me, and by the sound of it to you as well. Similarly, I applied to NASA. If you work at NASA, you can work anywhere. And I don't really have any specific other place that I want to work after NASA, but I knew that working at NASA, I felt like I could make a difference. I felt like I could influence the course of the development of technology and where we're going, and I really felt like since I've been here, I've made a bit of a difference. A small one, but a difference. So it's been rewarding in that sense. But not everything is perfect at NASA. There are some things that can be done better. So the last thing we're gonna hit on is what could be done better. What do you think?
Oh man, okay. Well, so for a lot of NIFs interns, they definitely strive to get a Pathways internship. So currently that goes through USA Jobs, which is its own entity separate from NASA Force. So you have to go through the whole application process to get the NIFs internship, but then you have to redo it completely for USA jobs.
Yeah.
And they are just starting to migrate some of the Pathways opportunities to Force, but filling out the same application twice is not the best.
I mean, it's difficult when you're talking about systems, and we're gonna have another episode specifically about systems, not just systems engineering, but systems. Yeah, so dealing with IT systems, but there's something, an organization as large as NASA, and for those of you who work at large companies, maybe work in the IT sector, you know it's really difficult to manage all these different aspects of IT and get them integrated, and the government is definitely no exception. So aside from that, it's a little bit impersonal, and that's kind of a byproduct of being in a large organization. And my experience as I've been here is, regardless of how good or bad you are personally, there's so many check boxes, so many things that you have to go through to either advance or get fired. Another downside, Kennedy Space Center is big, guys. And that was episode, I talked about SLS last time, so that was 2 episodes ago, episode 3. We talked about managing such a large space center and some of the strategic aspects we can do in the future to make it better. But really, when you're dealing with a lot of things that are volatile, you know, fuel sources, depots, things like that, it has to be spread out. Yeah, so the point is, it's big. It doesn't have a lot of public transportation. It's hard to get on and off center. And especially if you're coming out here as an intern, if you're gonna fly out, logistically getting onto base and getting around town can be a little bit difficult. So if you do get an internship, if anyone watching does get an internship at NASA at Kennedy Space Center, drive down or have a car or something, because it's difficult to get around. All right, guys, so that wraps up episode 5 of Scientific Drinking. We're gonna try to do this every month, bring on someone who is charismatic, talented, fun, outgoing, in a leadership position, just or all of the above, someone like Georgia here, and that's it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.